Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Urânio and Paes.
And today we are talking about the somatic dimension of the Enneagram.
Yay, I like this one.
Right. I think you're a specialist in this in ways that many people may not know if they haven't attended one of our inner work retreats.
Yeah, I just think that working on the somatics of the types is an essential way to unblock things and to heal, but also to understand the types and the subtypes.
Right. And I think we need to start by defining what do we mean when we say the somatic dimension of the Enneagram. I mean, I think one thing to be said is when we're doing a real effective program of inner work, of self development, we must include the body, right? We are embodied for a reason. There is almost nothing that we can work on in ourselves that doesn't have some connection to our bodies.
Right, yes. Yeah, and a few explanations. Our personalities impact our bodies in specific ways, but also the not only the nine, but the 27 subtypes. One example, you always talk about the importance of understanding self-press 4, and we say that self-press 4s are really resilient and stoic, and we see that self-press 4s carry a lot of pain in ways that they are not even aware of in a very high pain threshold. Or a one carries more rigidity in the body, or a five may have specific difficulties in stretching the body because of contraction that comes from the passion of avarice, or anxiety for sixes produces certain body aspects, and working on all those things help a lot in our growth. But also somatics on the Enneagram refers to the three triads, and how body types, heart types, and head types can have different ways of manifesting their personalities in the body. Like the body types, eights, nines, and ones, they somaticize more. Or another thing, just in this intro, is that according to the dominant instinct, self-press, social, and sexual, there are different areas of the body that suffer more impacts, and that we need to work on, so that we work on that dominance of that particular instinct. So we can talk about this in a while, but there are so many things that could be said about all that. And diseases, the correspondence between the types and tendencies for diseases.
Right. And when you say somaticize, some people may not know what that means. So I think we need to say that body types somaticize more. That means that it's a little bit like heart types will focus more on the emotional function, like feeling emotions, and may think about, sorry, heart types focus more on the emotions, and, like, for instance, as a heart type, sometimes I can think that I'm thinking objectively with my head, but I'm actually thinking with my feelings, right? Body types can sometimes sort of try to handle their emotions with their body, again, unconsciously. And so, for instance, when we don't, feel our feelings with our in the right ways and process them, sometimes our bodies can try to take over and we get illness, for instance, when an emotion gets stuck in the body and it's not properly dealt with by the emotions versus the a body type trying to manage things more through the body. And again, this would all be very at an unconscious level.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for this explanation. Yeah, and in our retreats, we do a lot of somatic work when the person is open for that, so that we can have this bigger transformation happening. and facilitating extra healing. When we go to China, that becomes an essential part of our work because people there are so open to this kind of work and healing in the body. And more in the West, we've been offering this kind of approach to students, but it's always optional. And yet it becomes a very powerful way of transforming.
Right. And I think you are particularly good at sensing when someone's energy is blocked in their physical body. And this happens a lot. Like you said, even just out of a type pattern, right? Like self-preservation ones, for instance, they tend to repress anger. And again, it can be a very unconscious mechanism where they just may have this deep seated sense that it's not okay to express anger. And anger is their passion. And they are part of the body triad, which is connected to the core emotion of anger. So you have a type that has a lot of naturally occurring anger, but then contracts against it. And so, of course, that's going to have a lot of impact on the body, often in ways that a one may not realize until they really try to work on it. But we also have things like the instincts, which are body based, and so our three instincts can have a huge impact on how we experience the body, how we get blocked in certain ways in the body, and of course, we need to become more open to being aware of how we're blocked in the body and how, for instance, if we've had a trauma in life, especially early on, that trauma gets held in the body. You know, there's Bessel van der Kolk's, now pretty famous book called The Body Keeps the Score, right? So when we have trauma, that's another element of the way that we may hold energy blocked in the body, which can could create really big problems, illness and other things, because we're not attending to what we're holding in the body or how we're contracting against our own life force in different ways.
Yeah, right. And I guess I'm going to say a few things about the dominant instincts and somatics. So, when the person is a self-preservation dominant person in their instinctual sequence, a few things that we observe in the somatic aspect is that there is in many cases when the person is a self-preservation dominant person, one thing we observe is that there is a lot of anxiety in comparison to other people of that type. This is a general rule. Sometimes it's not that much more, but many times it is. And another thing is that there is a particular impact of the self-press dominant instinct on what we call the solar plexus ring of energy. So around the solar plexus, which is in between the chest and the belly. So also where there is that bone in between chest and belly. So in that region, there is a contraction, but also an expansion when the person is self-pressed. So contraction and expansion. So there is a problem in that ring of energy that the person needs to work on. If it's social, there is the carrying load for other people is something more common, and that sometimes produces extra burdens to the body. And the equivalent to the solar plexus is in the cervical ring, which is shoulders, neck, throat, and even the jaws and neck all around 360 degrees. So upper back pain is a bit more common for socials, while for self presses it's a little more common in the middle part of the back. And for sexuals, there is too much intensity and therefore some imbalance in the energy of the body, but also the pelvic ring gets more impacted around the waist, more or less, and therefore sometimes lower back pain. And there is this need for regulation of energy in those areas.
Right. Really, really important elements connected to the instincts. Do you want to maybe go through the types and maybe not say something about each subtype, but maybe say a little bit about each of the nine types in terms of what they might want to be aware of somatically, or what they typically need to work on? Just something. We could say a lot about this.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So for eights, there is a need for looking at the intensity in the body, and almost regardless of dominant instinct, although it's more for a sexual eight, but it's too much. It's an expansion of energy, something that goes beyond what's needed, becoming a larger than life person, also from this somatic perspective. And this can happen even from the breath pattern, which tends to be more like, right, for eight, many, many times. And fast breath, sometimes also body movements of expansion. And I would say many, many eights B I've seen over time that they have injuries and they don't notice, or they carry on despite the injuries because of denial of any kind of vulnerability. And that includes physical.
Right. Right. And I also think that eights might be near the top of the list of types that don't pay attention to a kind of basic bodily self-care, which could include, when they're in a vulnerable state or having vulnerable emotions, like really just trying to power through, or almost using the body to take care of those more vulnerable situations through a kind of brute force, which can mean, we've seen eights that have different kinds of illnesses because they're not tuning in more deeply to what they really need.
Yeah, and many times eights don't notice when they are tired and they keep going, and they don't
Yeah,
notice how much their bodies are carrying more than it should or it can hold. And sometimes there are bad diseases that come from this.
right,
But
right.
should we move on to nine?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, nines in this last sense of what I've just said for eights, they also don't notice when stress is coming up or a big problem out of a little bit of self forgetting, but also out of the body trying to keep a certain state of balance and harmony that comes from ego. But that's not really what's happening with them. They might have been experiencing different things in the body. Now, one very strategic thing for nines to understand is that they lose energy because their vital energy goes outside towards people, things, environment, and they are not as energized at times because of that. And it takes a movement to bring back energy inside to be re-energized. We do experience that a lot in retreats, right?
yes, exactly. Exactly. And I just think that part of sloth for nines is not paying enough attention to themselves. Remember, the type 891 triad is sometimes called the triad of self-forgetting. Now, and even though they're body types, and you would think that maybe the body types would be more in touch with the body, very often, and for sure with nines, body types aren't very tuned into their bodies, just like any of us can be just not very focused on our physicality, on being present and aware and attuned to our body, which is in some ways an act of conscious will to be self-aware, right? Just like we go to sleep to all aspects of our experience, we also go to sleep to our bodies. So nines in sloth, and sloth being the passion whereby nines kind of lose all energy and focus when it comes to themselves, by not focusing on, how am I feeling today? What's going on in my body? What does my body need? How can I be awake and alive in my body? such that I can be motivated to exercise or do positive things for my physical self. Sometimes nines are sort of checked out when they're in personality about the whole physical sense of self.
Yeah, and there are two things that nines can do that tend to be a bit counterinstinctive, but very useful for them, somatic wise. One is to bring in discomfort to the body because that wakes them up. And the second thing is to develop way more tone in the muscles so that they self remember.
Yeah.
But should we move on to ones?
Yeah, we said a little bit about ones so far, but I think ones are types that really need to focus on their physical self. I know my father is a one, and he would his whole life had this sense that he had to exercise multiple times a week. Like that wasn't really a choice for him. He felt very compelled, and I think that was healthy. But what would you say about ones in the somatic dimension?
Well, tension in the body, bringing in tension because of the anger kept inside, right? And self criticism and more. But there is a way that ones need to relax in general. And that can be done with fun, leisure, with humor. And that's essential for ones to develop. So the body based work for ones of relaxing is super good. And many times, things like spontaneous dance and body expression, movement is operates miracles for once. Now, in terms of somatic tendencies, more in the disease side, the the health side, in psychosomatics, ones tend to develop things like ulcer or gastritis that has have to do with keeping anger in the inside also.
Yeah, I think eights and nines can be prone to that as well. Different kinds of uh, disorders of the bowel, the digestion, all of that can be problematic if eights, nines, and ones aren't taking better care of their physical self and more just again aware and awake and attuned to what's happening in my body right now.
Yeah, but for ones also rigidity in parts like the jaws and all over the body actually, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. A lot of body tension, again, especially for self-preservation ones, because they don't get the anger out as much. And sometimes when we work with self-preservation ones, we might say, okay, you need to get angry more. And that can be really hard, a real challenge for a self-pres one who sort of is just so accustomed to having it locked inside and being pleasant and friendly on the outside, being a good person, and not recognizing that, hey, you need to move that energy of anger because anger is energy.
Right. Yeah. Now let's move on to choose. One thing I notice with choose is this breath tendency of exhaling more, like putting my energy outside by exhaling, and concentrating in the inhaling might be a good thing. Now, too much energy in the chest, perhaps at times too much operation of the heart that can lead actually to the excess exercise of the heart with potential consequences. But one thing that I also notice for choose is pain on the upper back. And isn't it a big symbol for caring too much, including for others, right? And not
Yes.
really asking for help and more. And choose don't complain usually as much as other people. Do you have this experience yourself as a Chew?
Yeah, and one thing I noticed about myself somatically at one point was that my shoulders were sort of moved forward. I would sort of hunch forward, almost as if my shoulders were coming around to protect my heart.
Yeah, I do think that that happens with shoes, but perhaps a little bit more with self-pressed shoes. And I do think that there is also the opposite problem of the shoulders going way back because the chest puffs up.
Well, I've had to really work on, like, moving my shoulders back, and it feels when I do that, I feel very exposed. It feels hard, but it also feels like that's what my body needs to do. So I even realized at one point I was walking sort of hunched over forward and leaning forward, the upper part of my body leaning forward, almost leading with the heart in a way, but also kind of hunched over and protecting it somehow as a self-preservation dominant too. But what else would you say about twos?
Yeah, so I think there are these two tendencies according to subtype, but see how it's a lot about the heart, and then not attending to different body problems they may have because of a usual hard time with self-care and 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 complaining less than they should, so e- even if there are not as many particular tendencies somatic wise, I think this is a general big thing that Jews need to look at.
Yeah, and I can remember when I was a little bit younger being not very in touch with my body at all, and not even tuned into it. So I remember when I was in studying to be a psychotherapist, and I took a Gestalt therapy class, which is very body-based therapy, and developed by eights, I think, or an eight. I remember when they would always be saying, "How do you feel in your body? What do you feel in your body? What do you feel in your body?" And I realized I was very out of touch with my body. Just not, I didn't know, or it would even irritate me. I would get emotional, get sort of frustrated with that question because it did draw my attention to how out of touch I was with my body.
Yeah, let's move on to threes. So
Yeah.
obviously threes overuse the body because they can't stop, and also they have a fast pace, and they are always doing, and meaning that the body moves too much. Actually, most of the time, this is the pattern, and I'm afraid we need to say that threes are among the types that have more serious stuff happening because of all of that, such as strokes in earlier ages. And this, the body needs to stop the person at times. And finally, I would say that the breath pattern can also be too fast, and hiding from self and others, tiredness, and eventual problems that can be happening in the body.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it. Yes. I even think that threes are one of the types that might compulsively exercise, which, to some degree can be a good thing because there are people who exercise really regularly, but they can also be people who overdo exercise and movement, that can work out too hard, or, their type three tendency to avoid feeling by doing and taking action and moving, not being able to stop moving can be something that affects them physically. Sometimes they're prone to accidents, or disease because they're not tuning into how the body may need to rest, or how they may need to feel their emotions through the body and not just keep moving as a way of avoiding emotions.
Yeah, good point. And I would add that sexual dominants also have that tendency of over exercising. So I do see lots of sexual threes that have this issue. Anyway, let's move on to four. So fours have, interestingly, be when it comes to diseases, I do see that there is a slighter, bigger tendency for autoimmune diseases. I think there could be a few explanations, but
Mhm.
I want people to hold this lightly because I haven't done any kind of scientific uh, research on this. Now, fours also have this concentration in inhaling. and also overusing the heart, and sometimes shoulders going forward, like you said you do as a self-press too, and generating some back pain. And as we said, the self-press force in general, may have more pain in the body that goes unacknowledged. And finally, I would say that the subtypes change things quite a bit. So problems that come from anger, from sexual force, and like depressive states for social force. So there are quite a bit of differences among the subtypes.
Right, right. And I do think, like you said, it can be in some ways the hardest for the self-preservation for, but really all fours. And I do think that, one of the key patterns for type four is being attached to suffering. And for self-preservation fours, because they internalize suffering, they can sort of be people who like make a virtue of suffering and so are really tough and tough it out and so can hold a lot inside. I know that sometimes you've tuned into a self-preservation for in the way that you can feel into what people are feeling in their body and sensing that, wow, I can't believe that person even is walking, because they hold pain inside the body and then they get attached to that pattern of holding on to pain. But I also think that social fours, for instance, can do that in a way that's a little more emotional, like transmuting emotional suffering that they may hold on to can have a bodily effect that they're not very aware of, and so getting attached to suffering can have a physical correlate in ways that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and by the way, I want to say a word about the repressed instincts. When it's repressed self-press, very prone to injuries and to problems that come from inattention to bodily needs. Like, for instance, I've seen quite a bit self-press repressed people that had dehydration issues, or even silly accidents out of distraction. Yeah, social repressed people sometimes tend to be a bit more in anger, especially if sexual dominant, when it comes to society things, or some sort of skepticism that can impact the body in a few ways. And then sexual repressed, an overall low level of energy that brings also to some somatic issues and some body energy tendencies.
Sometimes you'll look at people and sense that they have a very low level of vital energy in their flowing through their body. And that can be another way that we suppress ourselves unconsciously when we're in personality, of like strangling off the vital energy that can flow through us.
Right. Yeah. So type five, my type. So fives have this interesting tendency to breathe less and less and less, and also feel tired more often. So save energy too much. But I also see something so interesting, which is either hearing problems, or sight problems, which has to do, I think, with a very convenient thing for fives, which is I don't hear you, right? And also something like I have glasses between you and me, and yet it's also because of a bigger sensitivity to things like noise and light. So there are more issues there. And then, as I mentioned before, some problems stretch in the body and contraction in the body. Like, for instance, the back part of the thigh is usually for fives very contracted.
Yeah, and I think you would know about five issues in the body, so that makes a lot of sense.
So sixes have this tendency for anxiety, as I said before, and many things happening in the body, from contraction to bigger expansion for sexual sixes, but above all, tension, and lots of pain on the back, and with the social subtype having usually a very high pain threshold. So a lot of pain and not much complaining, which is tends to be different at times for self-pressed sixes, for instance. Now, one thing that I also see is, actually, for all head types, a little bit more of things like ADHD because of excess of thoughts, even more so for sevens, right? But some headache for head types, and that's not different for sixes.
Right, right. And sixes have a hard time really relaxing the body, and they may not even realize that they aren't relaxed at all most of the time until they really, really focus in on that and realize that the underlying anxiety that sixes have can mean that it's almost like the body has this constant sense of being on alert, on high alert. So sixes can really benefit by really tuning in to how relaxed am I, and can I go into deeper and deeper states of relaxation that I may not even know are available to me.
Right. And finally, sevens. B. I think one thing to say about sevens is anxiety also. It's very, very common, although sometimes a little less easy to diagnose because of um, not exactly being concerned with things. It's more like excessive energy and imbalance of energy, too much at times, being too excited, So that brings a few things. But overall, using too much the head, and some problems coming from that, and also usually a low pain threshold. This is more common for sevens. And it's useful for sevens to develop more body resilience many times, and also body grounding. It's a bit harder for sevens to feel grounded in the body.
Right, and sevens may also have underlying anxiety that they don't feel, they aren't aware of consciously. They may experience it even as excitement. They may translate that in a way, and so that underlying anxiety can also create has physical manifestations that sevens may not be aware of until they really, really do the work of tuning into that deeper layer.
Right. Yeah, and in our courses, we recommend many different specific things for each type, from different sports to different, like, martial arts, or exercises, or massage, or there are many different things that can be done, even in short exercises to be done at home. Now, there is also all the aspect of preventing for diseases, and then working on how emotions get stored in the body and where, for all types, and sometimes with bigger tendencies for some. So, to me, this is a very important dimension of self development work, but also fascinating, because we learn so much about the Enneagram and the types through the body.
Right. Exactly. And a lot of it is about having that same level of conscious awareness that we have to our thoughts and our emotions, to our bodies, to how we're doing in our bodies, how we use our bodies, how we may be unconsciously coping with certain difficult circumstances by doing some things with our bodies in automatic ways that we aren't aware of, and it becomes a habit and then creates problems. So, We always work with the body in our retreats and experiences. Of course, a little harder online sometimes, but I think this is a really, really important dimension. And of course, some of it is individual, right? There are some things that we've like just said that are type based, some things that are about the instincts or the manifestations of the instincts and the triads. But of course, some of it is also individual, individual history, traumas that we hold in the body, which is why we need to really be doing somatic work when we work with the Enneagram.
Right. Yeah. Great talking to you about this, B. We work with this many times, but we don't always have the time or the initiative to process that and come to a better systemic understanding of it. So I was glad to record this podcast. And of course, it's just a little bit of a very comprehensive and complex theme.
Right, right. And we'll continue to work on um, this and both in terms of theory and practices and methods of working with ourselves, applying the Enneagram to the body. All right. That does it for this episode of the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. We hope you'll join us again next time where we talk about all things Enneagram.